One of the most complicated things for a new debater to figure out in IPDA debate is what do you use to weigh the round? We've talked about what is IPDA, all of these different kinds of resolutions, different kinds of debates you might have, but there's this lingering question. What is a weighing mechanism and how do I use it? Hopefully, this video can help answer that question. In short, a weighing mechanism is a decision criteria. What is the judge using in order to decide who wins the round, which side of the resolution to support? In truth, the judge is voting for or against the resolution based off of the arguments presented. However, they often think of it as who won the debate, who lost the debate as well. But providing them a clear and well-articulated weighing mechanism helps your chances by both proving that you understand debate and are familiar with what's going on, but also by giving them a pathway to decide the ballot instead of just leaving them ambiguous. Especially lay judges are looking to be told what to do. So this is how you do it. So IPDA debate, weighing mechanisms. We're going to talk about this in the three types of resolutions. We're going to go fact, we're going to go value, and we're going to go policy. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Here we go. Fact rounds. The first thing you want to do is assess the resolution. Think about what's the threshold, right? That doesn't always lead you to a weighing mechanism, but it helps you. It's a thing you should do. What's the language? Is there a specific word that leads you to a specific weighing mechanism or sort of scopes it to a context or lays out a specific area that this is talking about? Is it a high threshold or a low threshold? Always a good question, regardless, because that helps you decide if you want to debate it or not. There's also definitions. You might not have those off the top of your head, but as you look at keywords, you might be like, this is kind of where this is leading. This is the sort of debate that this is going to be about. Some people say, oh no, this is just going to be a definitions debate, and they shy away from it. That's perfectly fine if that's your preference, but sometimes you don't have a choice, and you need to be ready to debate that. Are we getting a true false? Pens are better than pencils? Or are we getting a good bad? Plastic bottles do more harm than good. You see that pens are better than pencils example also could be interpreted as a value, that the values would be more metaphorical, right? The pen is mightier than the sword would be a metaphor that leads to a value resolution. But if it's blunt like that, pens are better than pencils, that would be a yes, no, this or that fact round because it's pre-fiat. There's no change. If it's saying we should outlaw pens in favor of pencils, that would be more value and or fact round. I'm sorry, policy round. So those are some things to think about. Usually in a fact round, if you're looking at a present tense fact resolution, on balance, paired with more true than false is the way to go. Is this a true statement? On balance says basically in most cases. So some people will try to get picky if the resolution says is, and then they'll have like a definition of is that suggests that it means in every instance. On balance sort of takes us out of that and says in most cases, on balance, this is more true than false. So you can't have just one instance proving something true and having it wiping out the entire or false, right? And have it wipe out the entire other side. So you want to develop a script on this one. I recommend the scale analogy. On balance basically means that at the end of the round, judge, you're going to have a scale. You're going to have some instances in which this is true, some instances in which it isn't true, and you have to decide that in most cases, on balance, is it more often true than false or the other way around? And if it's more true, you should feel comfortable voting for the affirmative. And I want to ingrain that language. More comfortable voting for the affirmative or more comfortable voting for the negative. Don't tell the judge what to do, tell them they should feel comfortable doing that. So again, it pairs true false. Generally, you're talking about a present tense focus. Single stream recycling is better than multi-stream. This is a this or that. It could be interpreted as a value because you're sort of saying do one over the other, but in general, it is saying in the status quo, this is true. Paper books are better than ebooks. Better tends to be an evaluative word. Again, could be value. But if you want to look at this in a present tense true false framework, you can do that. Right? So it's Aft's choice. If they run it as a fact, don't try to argue it should be a value. AI is a serious threat to the economy. Serious threat, that's your threshold. Has that criteria been met? You might find that then this is evaluated through an economic lens because we're not really worried about education because it's a serious threat to the economy. So you can see that scoping, right? But again, more true than false. And Florida should be split into two states, not a fact round. I included that because some people would run that as a fact. But again, it's not. You're looking at a future tense, but you can see how it seems similar. The moment it becomes a future, it's not really a fact round. Don't argue that it should be a fact round if someone runs it as a fact round, right? That's when you press your weighing mechanism to be otherwise, right? But you can, I like that example because you can see it's not a true or false statement, it's a what is best in the future cost benefit analysis. When you're talking about a value weighing mechanism for a fact round, which is permitted, right? You're looking at situations like this. The environment should be our highest priority. That is a true false statement. It could be taken as a future because you could use like, oh, prioritizing the environment does these positive things, right? But this might also be a debate about how this is more of a concern right now. Um, and you might have a value of quality of life as your weighing mechanism. It gets a little tricky because, again, that feels value-ish, but it doesn't matter how you define it as long as it's clear. This house believes that fed is best. This is often a parenting statement, like a fed child is better than an unfed child, regardless of the nutrition, right? So this can become a fact round because it's a statement of truth. Is this a true statement? Right? But you could use a value framework of health. It's better for children to eat than to not eat. I really like that example, and you might see that in practice rounds or at a tournament. Education was better off without AI. Really good example of using a value because this is clearly going to be about education. Was pre-AI or post-AI better, right? And so through the value of education, right? Has AI helped education or hurt education? Sometimes that value is inherent in the resolution. A balanced breakfast is more important, is the most important meal for children, but that's clearly a health direction, similar to the Fed is best one, or education being inherent in the resolution. Sometimes that value is one you have to choose. So Amazon is better than Walmart. I would argue this feels value-ish, but because it's present tense, you can use a value criterion such as environmentalism, such as accessibility, to argue this. You might also use on balance more true than false, and then have these different values as your main contentions. Right? So that's why I like kind of putting these two next to each other because you can think about it on balance more true than false because Amazon's more accessible, Amazon's better for the environment, Amazon's better for this. So because it's better in these three values or contentions, reasons, it is therefore improved or better. When you're talking about value rounds, again, assess the resolution first. Is it a this versus that? Objectivity breeds better results than subjectivity. So you could look at that and see fact round. Again, similar to the Walmart versus Amazon argument. Could be fact, could be value, right? But because this is more philosophical, I think that this leans more value, right? And you're talking about breeds better results. So you are looking at the future. The Buccaneers are a better sports team than the Lightning, right? So you're talking about Tampa Bay's football versus Tampa Bay's hockey team. Again, the this or that, the better language leads you more towards a value. Um, so this Walmart Amazon one could go either way. So you see how that's sort of a little ambiguous, and that's another reason you shouldn't necessarily press someone, but should always ask for disclosure. Is it a general policy style resolution? So I've heard that language used and I don't like it, but I think it makes sense, right? So the IRS should be expanded. Not how should the IRS be expanded, not when should the IRS be expanded, just an analysis the IRS should be expanded would be a value round. You don't need a plan text, you don't need a specific policy, actor, agency, funding, right? But you don't get to fiat away all of those consequences. So I'm expanding the IRS. They're going to say, this is going to be really expensive. You don't get to say, I don't have to provide a funding. We're just arguing if it's a good idea. But you do have to defend the costs over, or the benefits over the costs to an extent, right? But you would use a value to sort of frame that, right? We're talking about social welfare, social well-being, quality of life would be a good value for that one. That expanding the IRS allows the IRS to collect more money and improve quality of life, and theoretically could pay for itself. Schools should eliminate detention, right? Again, sort of a policy-esque resolution because it's a kind of an actor and then a policy and then a proposal of change for the future, right? But you're going to look at this through value, right? Perhaps it's education in general. Perhaps it's equity or justice, because what happens is a lot of black and brown students end up in detention more frequently than white students, right? That data exists and therefore should be eliminated. The negative might argue it shouldn't be eliminated, it should be modified, right? That would be a negative alternative, right? So you can see again how that sort of becomes a value slash policy. But I'd like that argument listed as an alternative on the negative side for a value debate like that. As you can get the benefits of the discipline, but you don't have to get all the harms of the current detention system, right? Reformed is not eliminated. Um, but again, that leads you to what you want your value to be, right? This or that, which pits two values against each other, right? Even whether it's the Walmart or, the other one I gave, which was the objectivity breeds better results than subjectivity, right? This versus that, okay? Innovation ought to be favored over stability. Safety is more important than personal liberties, right? Those are a couple of classic ones. Um, what you want to do, because you have two values fighting, you pick a higher value through which to evaluate it, right? So perhaps safety is more important than personal liberty. You would use quality of life, or you would use something like, I like quality of life for that one personally, or justice could be good, right? That's a debate I've seen a lot of times. Innovation ought to be favored over stability. A lot of people are like, oh, innovation is improved because you focus on innovation. Yeah, but why is that good? Right? Again, I like quality of life here. Um, Perhaps education, right? Like repeating the same lessons over and over and over in class doesn't really work. But if you're innovative and are willing to take risks, you can improve the education system. You can use technology in education in new ways. That's like one example, one argument. You'd have to, if you're going to do a higher value, they'd all have to fall under that range. Net benefit to a value works when the resolution offers only one side. Protecting personal liberties should not be forgotten. The letter of the law should be the only thing considered, right? These don't offer, the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law. They don't offer protecting personal liberties over safety. And again, forgotten is a low threshold, not used, not enforced. So understand that on the negative, forgotten is a low threshold. Um, so net benefit to a value. So you could use a similar one, right? Like letter of the law should be the only thing should be the only thing considered. Like, no, I think it should be the spirit of the law, but we're going to use the value of justice because I think justice is better upheld using the letter of the law. Again, disclosure is necessary because justice is a lane within the broader scope of that resolution. So that's why you always ask for disclosure. But you would pick a value I'm going to generate a list of values that you might think about that are common in debate. I'm just not going to include them in this. You can also use a philosophical framework. There's some quick descriptions here, but social contract theory is common. Um, Basically, we give up something to the government in order to get things back. Consequentialism is one I strongly recommend. If you're not sure what value or what fits, consequentialism is a really good philosophical framework to use. And then you could put individual value or assessments within the argument. So honestly, this, if you needed a default, this might be the one. We evaluate what is moral or right or best based on consequences of those actions. Ties a little bit to utilitarianism, which is the most good for the most people, but it's less cold mathematics. It looks at all of the consequences. And then I also like negative utilitarianism, which should take the action that minimizes the most suffering. So instead of the most good for the most people, we look at those who are the most disadvantaged and how we help them the most. Policy, our favorites. You can default to cost benefit analysis. If you are AF and you are defining it as a policy, I think cost benefit analysis is a 100% of the time good option. We should look at the costs and the benefits and weigh out which option is best. Doesn't ignore the negative, rather focuses on weighing the whole picture. Similar to the on balance scale, I wouldn't use that particular framework for this just because a lot of it's a if we're using it for on balance, it might confuse people if we start using it for cost benefit, right? But this sets up a really nice two worlds analysis. Net benefit considers the positive changes to society slash context, right? Because you're AF, you're running advantages, negs running disadvantages. In theory, it looks at the whole picture, but as the name suggests, it mostly looks at what is added, and again, ties to utilitarianism a little bit. You can also run those philosophical frameworks in policy rounds, right? You can look at things through a consequentialism lens. While it's not inherently a philosophical debate, we can use that to assess the best approach. Um, Things can get messy if you're using utilitarianism and moral frameworks. Just make sure you know it well enough. And then you can use a value criterion, right? The net benefit to education. And it's a little bit unconventional approach, but not against the rules. It's actually really easy for lay judges to understand. Using some of these big terms like net benefit and consequentialism can confuse them. So simply saying net benefit to education, net benefit to health is a really simple way for a lay judge to be like, ah, I now understand what this debate is about. I am assessing what is best for education. So it's easier to define something as a value round if you want to go this way, but you can do it for a policy round. So wrap up. There's different types of topics that suggest different kinds of weighing mechanisms. Do not default to on balance, more true than false. I see that so often and it bothers me. I would advise something more like cost benefit analysis. Maybe they don't offer a weighing mechanism if you're in a novice round. Maybe they, offer a weird one that doesn't make sense because we're at a West Coast tournament and they say words and you're just like, those are words, but I don't know how they fit together. Um, Ask questions, obviously, if you're not clear about what the weighing mechanism is. Consider what the resolution tells you, not just what you prefer, but also thinks about what kinds of things you're good at debating. So if you're really good at debating education, and that's a topic that you know inside and out, running a weighing mechanism of education when that's an option, not a bad idea because that plays to your strengths. Um, Sometimes you'll get topics like we had one once that was Avatar: The Last Airbender is a better show than Legend of Korra, and we made it a debate about diversity and representation because that's what that debater really wanted to debate about, and there's a lot of that going on in the show. Um, so just know what you like, and we can help fit that into a topic, even if it's a topic you're like, I don't know a dang thing about the NFL. It's like, well, let's talk about something you want to talk about within the framework of the NFL. So that's what's going on. Hopefully that was helpful. And I've decided I'm going to say this for all the videos. See you in round.